In this video, we're going to talk about one of the hottest and most important topics in the NFT space right now, creator royalties. We're going to talk about why people are talking about them right now, why it's so important. I'm going to share some information that many people don't know about creator royalties. Hint, they're not enforceable at a smart contract level. I know it's crazy, but I'll get into that later. We'll talk about some of the marketplaces and their approaches to enforcing or not enforcing royalties, some of the incentive structures for projects, and why I think creator royalties for large-scale projects are not ideal, even though it's been the status quo for a while, what artists can potentially do to protect themselves, what we as a community should do to look out for the space and the culture and ethos that we've had. There's a lot to unpack, so let's dig right in. Why am I talking about creator royalties now? Why is everyone talking about it over the last few weeks? Maybe to preface all this, let me discuss why creator royalties are important, what they are, and the dirty little secret of the NFT space. Creator royalties is the concept that when someone buys an NFT and then goes on to sell it in the future, a percentage of their sale from the secondary market is given back to the original creator of the NFT. Now, for artists, you can very quickly realize how this is appealing. For a very long time, basically all of human history, if an artist would create a piece and it would sell for $200 or never sell, for their life, but then, 50 years later it sells for $10 million, the original artist receives none of that. And it just never quite seemed fair. And there has been a push in the traditional art world over the last 10, 20 years to give royalties back to the original artist, even if it is later sold on the secondary market. And the NFT space has really adopted this and tried to make it a fundamental tenet of the space. And it really has become that way. NFTs and art are just like a match made in heaven. And one of the most appealing things for artists is, this whole idea that, well, I can create something and sell it and in perpetuity receive royalties if that work continues to be desired and traded and sold and bought. And, I've spoken to so many artists who say that was the reason they got into the space. And I agree. I think it's a fantastic idea and culture that we have. But the dirty little secret is that royalties are not enforceable at the smart contract level. I know, my brain exploded the first time I heard that. It was like, wait, what? What? Isn't that what this whole thing is about? Isn't smart contracts, aren't they meant to be smart? Aren't they meant to enforce this for everyone forever? And the truth of the matter is that because of the way smart contracts are designed and because everyone has to have the ability to transfer it without paying money, if you want to send it from one wallet to another or you send it to a friend for free, etc., there has to be an option to transfer the token without paying anything for it. And because of that, there's no way to enforce and absolutely guarantee that when a sale happens, a royalty is paid. The way royalties work at the moment and have since the beginning is that they're honored at the marketplace level. So OpenSea, Super Rare, Foundation, X2Y2. Actually, we'll get into X2Y2 in a moment because they just had some interesting news come out today. But these are a bunch of marketplaces where, and OpenSea is probably the most well-known one, where people buy and sell NFTs. And, if you go to sell, it will tell you that there are some fees involved. There'll be on OpenSea, it's a 2.5% marketplace fee. So let's say you sell something for $100. I'll use dollars for simplicity's sake. $2.50 will go to OpenSea. And then the creator of the project is able to set their own creator royalty. And that could be 2.5%, it could be 5%, it could be 10%. An industry standard for artists has been 10%. That's what it is on Super Rare. And so then at the sale price for that $100, let's say it's a 5% creator royalty. So now $2.50 goes to OpenSea, $5 go to the creator, $92.50 will go to the seller if the piece sells. The way that works is that the creator of the collection goes into OpenSea, manually has to set their royalty percentage, and then after the sale happens, it doesn't automatically get sent to them. OpenSea on their end has to effectively manually send out all these royalty payments to creators and to artists. And if one day OpenSea decides, hey, we're just not going to do that, or we don't want to honor the royalties, there's not a lot that can be done. There's not a significant amount of recourse for a creator. It's like, well, that sucks. Maybe we go to a different marketplace. And that's kind of what's happening right now. So the whole reason that I'm talking about this, I'm standing here, is a few weeks ago, well, actually 2 months ago, this new marketplace popped up called SudoSwap. And they effectively said, we're just not going to honor creator royalties. We have a 0.5% marketplace fee. And that's kind of it. I mean, it's a little more complicated and nuanced the way they have liquidity pools and stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. The crux of it is that they're the first kind of significant marketplace to say, hey, we're just not honoring creator royalties. Obviously, there was a lot of backlash and community was not happy with that, but they have been gaining volume and market share. And especially a couple of weeks ago, it started to hit ahead. And you might have remembered people were talking about it on Twitter, and I wrote a big newsletter about it. I'll post a link to that in the description below. And it was this real interesting turning point, discussion point, where people were like, well, a lot of people didn't know that creator royalties were not enforceable at the smart contract level. So it was a bit of a wake-up call. And then there's a lot of outcry by artists and creators, obviously unhappy with it. And just this, fierce debate going back and forth. Another major marketplace, I think the second or third largest marketplace after OpenSea, X2Y2, they announced that they are going to give the option to buyers of an NFT to decide how much they wish to tip effectively, or how much they want to pay for the creator royalty. So the creator themselves, they could say, hey, my royalty is 10% for this collection. And then when someone goes to buy that NFT, the purchaser says, well, okay, I will honor that and pay the full 10%, or I'll pay half because I think that's more fair, or I'll pay nothing because I want more money myself. It's opening this whole conversation back up again, and it's I'm not totally surprised because I sort of predicted that we'd be in this race to the bottom when it comes to creator royalties for 10K collections, let's say. Maybe this is a good time to take a side note and maybe talk about the differences between a 10K collection and an individual artist. And all of this this whole discussion comes down to really one key point, I think, that when it comes to royalties, you can't enforce them. That's just a technical, basically an impossibility without some significant drawbacks. So if you can't enforce them, what do we do? How do we ensure that creators and artists continue to be rewarded? Beeple basically said it best. He said, you have to make people want to pay their royalties. You have to make your collectors want to pay them to support you. I think for artists, this is doable. And I think it's something that we as a community, our culture, we really have to fight for. We have to say, you know what, NFTs and Web3, this is a chance to, improve the status quo. We don't want to go back to the way things have been for hundreds and thousands of years where, the rich get richer and new artists and creators are sort of not getting what they deserve or honestly deserve. I think that they should get a percentage of royalties for secondary market sales. And I think that we can continue that ethos and culture when it comes to individual artists and smaller collection sizes. If an artist creates a one-of-one piece, someone goes to buy it. For the most part, I think the buyer will be like, yes, I'm happy to pay royalties. Even the seller is usually happy to say, okay, I understand that when I bought this, I was, supporting an artist and part of the whole social contract. And that's what it is at the end of the day. A social contract is to pay royalties to the artist. If we can continue to enforce and, spread this ethos and culture, which we absolutely should, then hopefully, in 1 year, in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 5,000 years, artists are continuing to receive their royalties on their works and their creations. Creators of any kind, not just artists. It gets increasingly more difficult the more people there are within a collection. There's a lot of nuance to this, but I want to make another differentiation here, and that's between collector and trader, flipper, investor. So the latter, there are some people, a lot of people in this space whose only real desire is to make money. They care less or potentially not at all about supporting artists, about supporting creators, about doing what's right. And they're seeing it as a means to an end, as a new asset class, as a new industry to trade. And for those people, they will go wherever the fees are lowest. They are cutthroat and, trying to find whatever edge they can. And so the reason I'm saying this is that, the other side of the spectrum is you have collectors and people who are here to collect art and to support artists. And there's obviously a whole spectrum in between. And I think most people lie somewhere on that spectrum. But as a collection size grows, like a 10K collection, the odds that there will be a significant subset of the people who are just traders increases significantly. If you have, a collector base of 20 people who are supporting, who all like an artist and buy their work, maybe another few people come every few months, it's a lot easier for them to collectively and just individually say, yes, we want to pay our royalties. We want to support this artist. We're here to collect. When you get into these 10K collections, with several thousand unique holders, some of them are just coming to maximize profit and enter and exit and trade as high frequency as possible. They're looking for arbitrage opportunities from one marketplace to another. They're looking to take advantage of marketplace reward schemes and systems. They're looking to potentially use bots and just really maximize their profit. I don't think we will ever get to a point where we can collectively find a social contract that gets everyone in a 10K collection to be like, yes, we'll pay our royalties. There will always be, and you know, unfortunately, there will always be, or maybe not unfortunately, like it's a free world, it's decentralized, you know, people can do what they want. As a 10K collection, we won't be able to enforce royalties or get everyone to pay them. So what does that mean? Well, it means a lot, but I think royalties especially for like these larger 10K collections, have always seemed a little weird to me. Like the incentive alignment just seems off. And what do I mean by that? Azuki's a good one. As a collection, they make money if people trade the collection. They don't make money necessarily for the price to go up. They don't make money certainly if people hold their assets. It is in their best interest to have people sell and buy and sell and buy and trade high volume because they take a percentage of every sale. And that just seems off to me, doesn't it? Like, why is it in their best interest for people to have high volume and high churn? Shouldn't incentives be, as a collection, you want your community to be holding and you know, diamond handing, for lack of a better term, being part of the community for the long term? And so this leads to situations where a project can do something bad, or an announcement or news could come out that tanks their floor price, and Azuki ends up actually is a great example, because you know, several months ago, their founder Zagabond, it was like revealed that he had previous collections that had rugged or soft rugged or failed, and there was a lot of controversy and a lot of people unhappy, and the floor price tanked. It went from 20 or 30 ETH down to like 10, 8, but all the time, all these people were selling, and the creators were still making money, and that just doesn't quite seem right. And then, you know, people buy back in, creators make money, and this happens, you know, for every collection. Yes, projects need revenue streams to continue to support the project and pay for community-focused building ideas, utility, etc. I don't think creator royalties are bad for large collections. I just think that the incentives are a little skewed and messy and not really making a lot of sense. What does that mean? Like, where do we go from here? What's next? I think that project founders and anyone especially looking to launch a new collection, but also existing collections, should really be thinking very deeply about their revenue generating models and streams. And I think a reliance on secondary market royalties is increasingly going to become less and less stable and less of a sure thing. What are the other options? Well, Lava Labs did something with CryptoPunks where it was a free mint and they had 0 royalties forever, but they withheld 10% of the supply. They kept 1,000 CryptoPunks for themselves. Over time, they sold some off. When they eventually got acquired by Yuga Labs, they had 500 left in the treasury. They were part of that deal, and they got paid for that. It's interesting. I don't think it's perfect by any means, because it requires the project founders to effectively dump or sell their tokens on the public market at some point. And there are nuances and ways around that. You could say they could auction them off. They could sell them at a discount to the floor price, to people who are going to add value to the community and stuff like that. It's not perfect. And also, if the floor price doesn't go up, you know, maybe they don't get to take money out, and it's harder to have that initial burst of revenue to maybe get them to that point. Another model I've seen people toss around is like subscription based, where it's like, all right, you buy the NFT, you get access for a year, or you have to pay a certain amount every year to keep the utility benefits. I think that's interesting, and I think we're gonna see more of it. It kind of makes sense to me. Again, it's you are asking your community for additional funding to begin with. Additional funding as time goes on, which is a little different to what people are used to. But at the end of the day, if you're a business and you're trying to provide value to a community, you do need revenue, and having it come from your community that are supporting you and then immediately going back to reward them seems to make more sense than having it come from people buying in it, like entering and exit the collection. I'm a fan of projects who find external revenue streams that aren't reliant on selling tokens and trading tokens, having the community buy and sell tokens. Like, and I mean, another option is that you just release another collection, and you do an initial launch, and then 6 months later you drop another 10K. And I think by now we can say that doesn't really work. 99% of the time, it just dilutes the value, and the overall amount is the same, and it's extractive, and it works for the project. It doesn't work for the community, which is again a misalignment of incentives generally. So what alternative revenue streams? Well, That's where projects can get creative and do like B2B partnerships and potentially advertising if there's a media arm to the project, and merch and stuff. And that's not necessarily like merch as a revenue stream. Selling to your collectors is obviously not ideal, but if you can build up an IP brand and sell merch to the world, and that is a great way to bring revenue in. Obviously, it relies on the IP being well known enough and people wanting to buy in. It's a mess, but it's an option. I've seen ideas thrown around, and getting it back to the royalties piece, where you can, for new smart contracts, this is less applicable to the existing ones, potentially have a ban list or an allow list of marketplaces where people can trade those tokens. So you could say people are only allowed to trade our NFTs on OpenSea and LooksRare, because they are the only marketplaces that currently honor the royalties. Or if you're an artist, you can say Super Rare, Foundation, and OpenSea, for instance. That's pretty good and doable. It's also, you could expand that, and like if a new marketplace pops up that is honoring royalties, you can add that into the database and people can trade there. It does add this level of centralization that is not ideal. It doesn't 100% prevent the issue anyway, because people, at the end of the day, people can always OTC, over-the-counter trade. I can go to my friend Bob.
I don't have a friend Bob. I don't know why I said Bob.
Go to my friend Jamie. I have a friend Jamie. And I can say, I like that art blocks piece. I'll give you half an ETH for it. You send it to me. I'll send you half an ETH. Done. Just transfer functions, or hell, I could give him cash, US dollars. There's a million ways to avoid royalties completely. And if people want to do that, there will always be a small percentage of people that will do that. But I think as long as we can make it difficult enough for the majority of people, I think that plus the emphasis and the ethos on having people want to pay their royalties to support creators should be enough to get us where the majority of royalties are still ending up flowing to creators. Another thing I didn't touch on yet is the concept of terms and conditions at the point of sale of the NFT. Last year, this was not much of a thing. Most projects didn't talk to lawyers, and it was very still new in the space, but we've seen more and more as time goes on, and especially as these large brands enter the space, like Nike with Artifact, or Gary Vee actually with VeeFriends, being a large brand. If you look at the terms and conditions on their website, when you buy the NFT, you agree to pay royalties for any secondary market sales. Now, the enforceability of this is obviously comes into question. It's very difficult to enforce, and again, you will never realistically be able to stop people OTC trading, but it does allow you to potentially justify stopping people from trading on a marketplace which doesn't honor those royalties. I think there's a lot more room to be done when it comes to terms and conditions for NFTs, and I think we're going to see more on-chain terms and conditions. Like currently, for now, they very much exist off-chain. They're on a website, and there's a bit of a disconnect there, but I think we're going to see on-chain terms and conditions. I spoke with a couple of interesting people working on this recently. Another thing, and I know I'm just going all over the place, I hope all of these things are just food for thought that I would love to have people pick up threads and then continue the conversation out there, because it's such an important topic that I think everyone should be thinking about it in some capacity or another. And it's really going to be, I think, a major narrative over the next several months as the NFT space figures out how we want to solve this issue. So another one is that rather than like allowing or banning marketplaces to trade the NFTs, you can track the individual tokens, and if one is traded without the royalties being paid, you could potentially like block utility for that. So let's say it's a membership token to get you access to a Discord and live events and stuff like that. I'm not a dev, but I don't think it's that difficult to be able to identify if an NFT traded on a marketplace that doesn't honor royalties, let's say that, and then flag it and say, well, all right, that token can't be used to access our Discord. Maybe period, or maybe you have a counter and say, well, this is how much ETH you owe to cover the royalties. Once that amount is paid back to the project treasury, well, then all the utility unlocks. And I think for like utility tokens, membership clubs, it kind of makes a lot of sense. And I could see that being a viable option as we move forward. I want to bring it back to artists again, and specifically one-of-one artists who entered this space believing that creator royalties were like the game changer, the be-all end-all. I really believe that they still are and can be forever. Just because they're not enforceable on chain does not mean that they are not going to remain a thing that most people will honor. And a really great analogy that I heard someone come up with, OXXS, on Twitter mentioned this, is drawing this analogy between paying your royalties in the NFT space and tipping in the United States of America. Tipping is a cultural thing. It's a social contract. It is not law. You go by you have a $20 meal at a cafe, the law does not say, well, now you have to tip 20%. But basically, everyone will tip, I think it's like between 15 to 20% these days. And occasionally there'll be someone who decides not to, tips on the lower side, etc., etc. And that kind of sucks, and most people are not happy with that. The fact of the matter is, tipping is a cultural thing in the United States, and everyone, by and large, agrees to partake in this. I believe that creator royalties in the NFT space, specifically and especially for artists and individual creators, and I know that it gets murky when you say one-of-one artists and a 10K collection, and a lot of 10K collections, the art was created by a one-of-one artist. It gets messy, but I think it's important to recognize that they are different. Even if they shouldn't be different, people are treating them differently and will treat them differently. And so for the individual artists and the creators, I really believe that we can continue to drive home this culture of people paying their royalties and wanting to pay their royalties and supporting artists. And hopefully that continues as time goes on. There are things artists can do themselves to protect themselves and future-proof in case we do go to this flight to zero and descent where eventually no one's paying any royalties. You know, potentially if you release an edition of 10 or 12, hold back one or two of them and you know, you sell some now, and then if the collection does really, really well, you also have exposure to the upside. It's less valuable for someone who's only selling editions of one. Here's something you can do. You could, and this is I think what Murakami did, in their terms and conditions, they say, you know, if these conditions are broken, we can update the metadata and brick the NFT and make it into a white page or something. Again, not ideal, introduces elements of centralization, not relevant for certain types of on-chain NFTs and stuff like that. But there are a lot of options, and I think that artists should be proactively thinking about it. Creators, project founders, everyone in the space, you know, participants, collectors, investors, traders, flippers, all of it, need to be thinking about what is really going on here. Where are the incentives aligned for the various different types of projects and entities? What can be done? And I know that there's a lot of work already being done. People have already figured out, you know, how to add these code snippets that block or allow X marketplaces to be added. And you know, people say, well, isn't it then a game of whack-a-mole where new marketplaces are going to keep popping up? Yes, but it is a lot easier to add into a contract like allowed or banned marketplace than it is to deploy a whole bunch of new contracts for a marketplace. That gets expensive and time consuming, and to get people to use it, it's you know, that's a game of whack-a-mole or cat and mouse that I believe the creators can win. Whether or not we want to go down that path is another story. All right, that was a lot, I know, and there's going to be a lot more. I'll follow up with more videos and shorts and pieces on creator royalties, I'm certain, over the next few months. I mentioned earlier that I wrote an article on it. It was a really long article. I'll go into all of this, but more. If you're interested, check it out in my newsletter. If you like the content, please like, comment, subscribe, notifications on, all that stuff. It helps so much. Like for my YouTube channel, for the ZenAcademy channel, we're trying to grow it. We're trying to provide education, information on a various variety of topics, and that could really help. That's all I ask for, just a subscribe. All right, this has been Zeneca from ZenAcademy. Thank you and have a wonderful day.